Directions. You will now be asked a question about a familiar topic. After you hear the question, you will have 15 seconds to plan your response and 45 seconds to speak. Do you agree or disagree with the following statement? Coworkers make the best friends. Provide details and examples to explain your opinion. You have 15 seconds to prepare your response. You may begin preparing now. You now have 45 seconds to speak. You may begin speaking now. Directions. You will now read a short passage and then listen to a conversation on the same topic. You will then be asked a question about the passages. After you hear the question, you will have 30 seconds to prepare your response and 60 seconds to speak. You have 45 seconds to read the passage below. You may begin reading now. Now listen to a conversation about the same topic.
Hey Kyle, did you know that the students have to consult with an advisor to create their schedules now?
Yeah, I heard, and I totally agree. Plenty of other schools do the same thing. It makes picking courses so much easier.
Really? But don't you think most of us want to choose our own schedules?
You see, that's the problem. Students choose what they want instead of what they need. It's been a total mess. For example, last semester, there were about 5 students in my World History 2 class that never took World History 1. Needless to say, they struggled the whole semester.
Are you saying that someone can choose History 2 without completing History 1?
Yes, and that's insane. In my History 2 class, these students kept asking questions about things we had already gone over in the introductory course. They were a complete distraction.
I guess I see your point.
I mean, besides that, now students get a chance to speak with an advisor so they can figure out how the classes they take may benefit them in their future career. Last semester, I wanted to take a class called History of Rock and Roll because it sounded cool. But my advisor pointed out that it wasn't a requirement and wouldn't help me much in the future if I wanted to get involved in public policy.
All right. You sold me. So when should we make our appointments to see the advisor?
Now, answer the question. The man expresses his opinion on scheduling with advisors. State his opinion and explain the reason he gives for holding that opinion. You have 30 seconds to prepare your response. You may begin preparing now. You now have 60 seconds to speak. You may begin speaking, now. Directions. You will now read a short passage and then listen to a lecture on the same topic. You will then be asked a question about the passages. After you hear the question, you will have 30 seconds to prepare your response and 60 seconds to speak. You have 45 seconds to read the passage below. You may begin reading now. Now listen to a lecture about this topic in a business class.
Now, as the reading suggests, many companies have embraced the idea of compassionate consumerism over the past few years. Studies show that customers are generally supportive of such efforts, especially very young shoppers. Not only that, but companies make a lot of additional profits from this kind of compassionate marketing. Some companies even thrive off of it. Now, take ABC Shoes, for example. They're kind of like the pioneer of this type of consumerism. You know the shoes, right? Those flat, simple slip-on shoes which are based on a type of traditional Argentinian footwear called an alpargata. Anyway, ABC Shoes achieved a huge market share about 7 years ago with their one-for-one business model. Basically, if you buy a pair of ABC shoes, they donate another pair of shoes to an impoverished individual. While this program has cost ABC Shoes a lot of money to administer, they've also made so much profit that they've expanded to include not only shoes, but also eyewear and coffee. Speaking of coffee, another famous company that has adopted the compassionate consumerism model is Bob's Coffee. Now, the one-for-one model doesn't make much sense for a cup of coffee, but a portion of the cost of certain items is sometimes donated to various nonprofit organizations. Since Bob's deals closely with coffee bean farmers in South America, they have recently launched a campaign where 10% of all purchases are donated to preserving the South American rainforest. And, would you believe it, on the day they announced the campaign, there was a line out the door at Bob's Coffee right here on campus.
Now, answer the question. Using the examples from the lecture, explain what compassionate consumerism is and how it works. You have 30 seconds to prepare your response. You may begin preparing now. You now have 60 seconds to speak. You may begin speaking now. Directions. You will now listen to part of a lecture. You will then be asked a question about it. After you hear the question, you'll have 20 seconds to prepare your response and 60 seconds to speak. Now listen to part of a lecture in a psychology class.
Today, we're going to talk about human aggression. Now, you probably see aggression every day when people are angry in cars or pushy on the subway. Well, to be a bit more formal, aggression is considered any negative or harmful behavior that causes psychological or physical harm to another person or ourselves. While you may understand what aggression is, there is the question of why it even exists. In the field of psychology, there are two main theories as to why aggression exists. Many researchers believe that aggression is a product of evolution. Most agree that men are more likely than women to act aggressively, and this is most likely due to the need for males to display dominance over others. In the past, and still a bit today, men felt the need to act aggressive in order to both protect their mate and perpetuate their genes. Females tended to gravitate towards males they felt could keep them and their eventual offspring safe. The world was much more dangerous back then, and safety was of paramount concern, which is why more aggressive males were more likely to pass on their genes to future generations. There are psychoanalysts who disagree with this, however. Another popular account of why aggression exists is known as social learning theory, which takes the stance that aggression is something human beings learn to do, not something innate or instinctual. For example, research has proven that aggressive reactions are more common in certain social environments. Children who observe violence at home are more likely to exhibit violent behavior. Further still, children from homes that are relatively calm, but who are exposed to violence through movies or video games, also demonstrate aggressive behavior more often.
Now, answer the question. Using points and examples from the talk, explain two main theories as to why aggression exists. You have 20 seconds to prepare your response. You may begin preparing now. You now have 60 seconds to speak. You may begin speaking now. To me, I definitely do not think that coworkers make good friends because it's best to keep your work and personal life separate. I remember when I worked at an English school in South Korea. I had a coworker who had a bit too much to drink at a work party. After that, everyone in the office looked at him differently. Also, even if you are friends with your colleagues, the relationship often ends when one of you leave the job. For example, at the same job in Korea, when my friend Andrew unexpectedly quit and moved to another school in Seoul, we hardly ever spoke, since we were no longer in the same office together. That's why I think that coworkers do not make very good friends.
The reading passage announces a change on campus. In particular, the school has made it mandatory for students to meet with an advisor to make their schedule in future semesters. And the man in the conversation thinks it's a great idea. To start, he says that he had a bunch of classmates in his World History 2 class that weren't prepared for it. These few students turned out to be a huge distraction. They consistently interrupted lectures with questions about material that had been covered in World History 1. Secondly, he explains that meeting with advisors is a good way for students to properly plan out their schedules so they can ensure that they graduate on time. Before meeting with his own advisor, he almost took a history rock and roll class that wasn't required for his major. As you can see, the man in the conversation thinks this is a fantastic idea.
According to the reading, compassionate consumerism is when a customer makes a purchase and part of the proceeds goes towards a charitable cause. In the lecture, the professor delves deeper into this subject by providing 2 examples of this type of marketing. To start, ABC Shoes made huge profits by marketing their 1-for-1 model. Basically, if customers buy a pair of shoes for themselves, then the company would donate another pair to someone in need. Another example mentioned in the lecture is Bob's Coffee, which works closely with South American farmers. This coffee company announced a new campaign where 10% of all their proceeds would be donated to the conservation of the rainforest. On the day they launched the campaign, there was a line out the door in one location. So after listening, I now have a better understanding of what compassionate consumerism is and how it can help businesses become more profitable.
The professor goes into a ton of detail about human aggression, which is behavior that causes a person psychological or physical harm. After introducing the topic, the lecturer describes 2 theories about why aggression exists. The first theory is that aggression is a product of evolution. In the past, life was much more dangerous than it is today, and so males would act aggressively in order to show that they can protect their mate and offspring. Women gravitated towards more aggressive men and passed on this trait through their genes. She goes on to say that another popular theory on aggression is known as social learning theory, which proposes that aggression is a learned behavior. For example, children who observe a lot of violence at home or through movies and video games are more likely to demonstrate aggressive behavior towards others. So after hearing this lecture, I now have a better understanding of human aggression and why it exists.